This is an NBC News special report. Here's Jose Diaz-Balart.
Good afternoon. An update now on that deadly shooting near a busy shopping mall in El Paso, Texas.
9 people have been killed in a second mass shooting in less than 24 hours.
The earthquake rocked this impoverished Caribbean nation late this afternoon.
Sexually abused young boys, one as young as 8 years old.
A grand jury declined to indict Pantaleo on criminal charges.
8 coordinated bombings across the country.
Shows how the children are coping after weeks of separation from their families.
People of southern Louisiana and Mississippi may end up being the most tragic loss of all.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
So, what is trauma? Like, explain that to me.
Yeah, so trauma is this kind of buzzword that's been used recently, but it really describes an event that's out of the ordinary, that impacts your brain, your body, your emotions. It can be something physical or something emotional. It could be a car accident, it could be a fire, it can be abuse or neglect. A lot of children actually witness what we call vicarious trauma, meaning that they see their parents experiencing trauma, and as a result of that, they're traumatized. But they also experience some direct traumas for themselves.
In effect, in these neighbourhoods, children's brains are measurably growing up faster because of what they're exposed to. But that affects their ability to learn. It makes it difficult for them to build relationships, makes them more susceptible to depression and to drug use.
And it impacts everybody differently. It turns your whole world kind of upside down. It disrupts your normal flow of your life and your routine. It can halt a child's development. Like if you're 2 years old and you have a traumatic experience and it's kind of swept under the rug and not resolved and you don't get treatment or help for it, you might develop physically from that point, but something about your emotional development is going to be halted at that age. So you might be a little behind your peers in that area because of a traumatic experience that you've had that wasn't resolved.
Well, one of the most extensive studies on post-traumatic stress disorder in the community, and it found the staggering statistic that of those who lived in low-income areas in this city, 46% suffered from PTSD. That is a rate much higher even than soldiers who've seen war.
When you're in a constant state of traumatic events happening around you, you're what we would describe as hypervigilant. Like you're always kind of looking over your shoulder, you can't really relax. For children, school-age children, they can't really focus on learning, on playing, on being children because their focus is on protecting themselves or getting away from whatever violence or traumatic experiences are going on around them, and unfortunately sometimes directly to them. So you don't have a chance to be a child. You can't really focus on your learning, and some children get left back in school. Some children are labeled as having learning disabilities or behavioral problems. And if you really look under their behavior or under what's labeled as a disability, that's not really what's going on. They're just reacting to a trauma. And if the trauma is treated, there is a very good chance that the child might not have an actual learning disability or behavioral problems.
Instead of acting disappointed because I'm not like you, maybe you can just accept who I am and love me anyway because I'm your son.
Theo, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. There's no wonder you get D's and everything.
Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker.
We now understand, better than we ever have before, how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer.
Think about being a kid growing up in Camden, a young kid, and hearing gunshots at night, hearing sirens all the time, possibly seeing people that you know and you care about being killed or gunned down or fighting or abused. And when people being gunned down and when violence becomes routine for children, then that becomes their response. That becomes, you know, when something happens that I don't like or that doesn't feel good to me, my routine way of responding is what I've seen all around me, which is violence. So if I don't like what you said, instead of talking to you about it, I might hit you, I might punch you, I might get something to pick up to really hurt you. So when we become desensitized to violence and trauma, then our reaction is never going to be appropriate because we no longer have what we would call healthy coping mechanisms.
Why are you so angry?
First of all, ain't nothing wrong with me. Secondly, I'm not angry, okay? I'm not angry.
You seem angry right now.
No, I'm not angry. This is how I am. I don't have no hostility at all.
Okay. Look.
Are you getting angry, doctor?
I think that we need not only just teachers, but staff members, administrators, higher-ups, whoever may be, loving on these kids, building the rapport with them, showing them kindness, because ultimately, if you're traumatized or if you had a traumatic experience, you're not going to respond well to someone re-traumatizing you. Someone that's sitting in my chair and is traumatized in that moment, if I'm yelling at them and saying that they need to get their stuff together and I can't believe this, I can't believe that, that's traumatizing them.
So rather than get suspended or sent to the principal's office for a referral, they're sent to us where we can help them self-regulate themselves.
I knew suspension was not a good thing. Sending the children back home to some of the neighborhoods that they have to travel in, you know, it just didn't sit right with me.
And when you're ever in a heightened scenario, whether it's anger, stress, frustration, your heart rate increases. And so if you're able to use your breath to slow everything down, you're not as impulsive, you're not as reactionary, and you're able to respond to whatever scenario happens to present itself.
So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, and play as a way to learn.
So with school-based youth services, when we see, when there is a trauma in the community, we go into activating a trauma response team. So as the therapists, site managers with school-based youth services, we work with the district, child study team, family operation coordinators, administration on being available to the students at that school, at schools that may also be experiencing a reaction.
So here in school-based youth services, engaging the family is really important to us. So we do that in lots of different ways. It sometimes might seem really simple in doing the different family events that we do, but a lot of times the point of it, of course, is to engage them, allow them to have fun, uninterrupted time as a family, but also so we can engage them, and then later on, if there is an issue, then we can say, oh hey, I actually met you at this family night, I have so-and-so here in my office, do you mind coming in for a meeting?
You have to fix the mind before you can bestow the blessing, because until they get their mind right, everything you invest in them is going to leak out of the crevices of a mind that refuses to change. Look at your neighbor and ask him, do you have a mind to change? Wait for an answer. If they say no, drag them to the altar. Tell them they got till midnight to get that fix. They've got till midnight to dump out all jealousy, all pettiness, all unforgiveness, all strife, all malice, all confusion, all blaming other people for your mistake. You got till midnight to get rid of every poison that's hindering you, every inflexibility that's stopping you from what God is about to pour into your life. Woe be unto you if you go into another year and waste another year with the old mentality while somebody's in the hospital begging God for the opportunity that you have right now. You better step into this moment. See, that's getting on somebody's nerves right now, because that old mind can't rejoice. No, not me. I can't rejoice. I'm still angry. I'm not going to rejoice till they apologize. I'm not going to rejoice until he leaves that other woman. I'm not going to rejoice until my children appreciate me. You are wasting time. You have to let the past go and step over into the future and say, I will rejoice.